I'll start by talking a little bit about RISC OS developments and RISC OS developments in the last 12 months. You may have come across some of what we've been up to via the RISC OS Open Forums and the London show, but I think if I give it all into a bit of perspective, that will be a good way to get a grasp of what's been going on. RISC OS Developments was formed a couple of years ago at the Southwest Show, as it happens, with an express goal of tackling what we deem to be the big issues in RISC OS. In particular, tackling the problem of web browsing on RISC OS. This information is made available to people who signed the non-disclosure at the time, but we've now made that public information, and today I'll be showing you the first fruits of that web browser work. Sorting out the web browsing situation on RISC OS was a major problem because obviously we have things like NetSurf that provide fast but limited web browsing, but we don't have anything on the par of something like Google Chrome or Firefox or any of the other modern web browsers that people expect to be able to access Facebook and modern websites. Developing a web browser is a major project. We're talking thousands of hours of work, highly skilled work, and that makes it potentially extremely expensive, and finding the right talent to do the job is a major problem because the moment you start talking about web browsers to the majority of programmers, their eyes glaze over and they sort of start finding excuses as to why they need to take other jobs. A painfully frustrating experience, I can tell you. Progress initially was pretty slow on that front, but various other opportunities for RISC OS development occurred during the first 12 months. And as many of you are aware, the ARMX6 project from Arcom was happening at the same sort of time, and was bringing together a large number of RISC OS companies to produce the ARMX6 and the supporting ecosystem. Because of this, and because it was well supported by the guys, you guys, people in the room, the ARMX6 was able to be a catalyst for much of what has happened since. You could argue it goes back even further to the Harmony and the Harmony X, which all led into what happened with the ARMX6. But because of the ARMX6 and because it was embraced by the user base, what we found was that compared to anybody else, we were almost the exclusive customer for Castle for RISC OS licenses. I think they sold a handful to other companies, but basically 95% of the RISC OS licenses that were being sold with ARMX6s. So when Castle were looking to divest themselves of RISC OS basically get rid of the old guard and get RISC OS over to a new guard of people who actually cared about RISC OS, the logical people to talk to were the people who were the main supplier of the operating system, the main licensee, which was the group of companies that represented the ARMX6 both in the UK and abroad. In case you're not familiar, the ARMX6 is used for a variety of purposes in different forms around the world, for both consumer usage and industrial usage. So the ARMX6 represents a consortium group of about 6 different RISC OS companies that benefit from each ARMX6 that is sold. That group of companies was able to get together under the RISC OS development auspices to acquire RISC OS last year from Castle, with the goal of making RISC OS available as easily as possible to as many people as possible. And that has ultimately led to the open sourcing in last October of RISC OS under the Apache license, which is a very flexible license which both protects the RISC OS software whilst also making it free for companies to use it. And unlike things like the GPL license, which is the common open source license, GPL means that anything that uses it has to become totally open for itself, which is very tricky for commercial organisations to use. If a larger company wanted to use a GPL piece of software, they have to publish all of their source code, more or less, in an open way, which has potential to be quite difficult from if you want to protect your own IPR product rights. So RISC OS is licensed under the Apache license, which allows commercial companies to protect their own work whilst keeping RISC OS open and free for anybody who wants to use it. So it's a very flexible, very practical license for anybody who wants to use it. As I said, that was directly made possible by things like the ARMX6, and before that, the other computers that we found. Once the open source door was open, suddenly the world is our oyster, because previously RISC OS was largely ignored on a commercial scale and worldwide scale, because RISC OS, with a Castle license, was seen as very opaque. People couldn't understand the Castle license, and even at its cheapest, you were still paying sort of £3 or £4 for a license. If you wanted to make 1,000 machines with RISC OS on, for example, that means you're looking at a bill of £3,000 to £4,000 just for an operating system before you even start. It was very impractical unless you were making something that was specifically RISC OS for the existing RISC OS user base. So for somebody like our kind, we would buy actually the most expensive licenses, but because the computers were RISC OS computers for a RISC OS using audience, that was no problem because that was why you were buying the computer. But if you're buying a black box to do a purpose, and you're having to pay £3,000 or £4,000 just to manufacture your unit, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And so, and if you take that, scale that up into orders of magnitude, it gets even more ludicrous. So, the importance of the open sourcing of the Apache license for RISC OS on a global scale cannot be underestimated. And what that resulted in, almost immediately, was interest from around the globe in RISC OS. In particular, we see companies in the Far East, particularly, I'm going to mention the Pine Book, which we're showing as the ARM book, or thanks for mistyping my last email, the ARM book, where we actually have managing directors of Far East companies emailing and saying, can we have a copy of RISC OS to run on our hardware to demonstrate it? Now, I mean, imagine, just stop very briefly there and just leave that to your imagination to imagine a situation where you've got people in the Far East, which is not traditional RISC OS territory by any stretch of the imagination. People who don't use RISC OS as hobby users or anything like that are asking us to provide RISC OS on their hardware so that they can show it to their customers. I mean, it's hard to believe even in the heyday of Acorn, things like that. But that's where we're back to now, thanks to the open sourcing. So anybody who thinks, crikey, I mean, giving RISC OS away was probably a really dicey move and shouldn't we have kept it very close to our chest and tried to make money off it, no. The doors that open sourcing opens are phenomenal. I'll give you another statistic. Over Christmas, I was monitoring the traffic that was coming through on Plingstore for software sales for RISC OS. Would you believe that, I mean, I'm sure you all know that RISC OS is traditionally a very UK-centric operating system. In the sort of 3 weeks over the Christmas period, about 3/4 to 4/5 of the sales on Plingstore were to North America. I'm not talking about 1 or 2 and I'm trying to fudge it with percentages. I'm talking about hundreds of pounds worth of business, might be even £1,000, but certainly hundreds of pounds worth of business, of which, shall we say, 3/4 was to North America and Canada, which is quite remarkable from a RISC OS perspective. It's certainly made me turn up and note. And quite frankly, this is the effect of open sourcing. It's given us massive coverage across the globe, from the US to China, across Europe. Only the BBC have been there. Despite me sending press releases to them, specifically saying, hey, these are the programs that the BBC made with this hardware. They will not cover it. But hey, the rest of the world is. So that's good.
The Click team not interested.
Click team are not in. Well, we got pre-horizontal relations lady, and she has been doing her best with all sorts of different departments at BBC. And so far, I have failed
Tipping
to,
away there.
Yeah, keep going.
you know, if we took our shirts off on Facebook, we'd probably get on the BBC. But if we actually do something useful with the technology that the BBC used, no, couldn't possibly report on that. So, basically what we've seen is a cavalcade of opportunities opening up for RISC OS in the last 12 months, particularly driven by this open sourcing of RISC OS, which has been made possible by the sales of things like ARMX6 and the other projects that you guys have contributed to. You've also supported us with things like O-Browser, and I see many faces in this room who are actually shareholders in RISC OS developments with an eye to the web browser. If you haven't supported any of those projects yet, then I have one simple message for you. RISC OS Developments is making things happen in RISC OS. You can see the projects here today, you can see the stuff on the RComp and the RISC OS Development stand and on Orpheus stand and everything else. If that is even remotely the kind of thing you would like to see happening with RISC OS, find ways to support us, please, because it is only with your help we can actually make these projects continue to happen and continue to flourish. But this is what we've achieved with the resources that we've got at the moment, and we're just pushing and pushing and pushing to make more and more opportunities. When I get the RMX6 online, you'll be able to see the first fruits of the web browser. But I'm going to now jump off RISC OS Developments for one moment and talk a little bit more about RComp and RComp Interactive, because obviously I need to put food on the table. I can't just do the free projects, as it were. RComp and RComp Interactive have two new software projects for the show this year. The first software title I'm going to show is the latest version of Fireworks. If I just close this window. The latest version of Fireworks introduces two major new features. The first is what we call statement mode, and the second is much better integration between the database system and word processor and spreadsheet in Fireworks. For those unfamiliar, Fireworks is a combined word processor, spreadsheet and database office application. It has particular compatibility with Microsoft Excel, which means one of the reasons why we're always enhancing the spreadsheet component of it. But the latest version, I say, also improves the database and makes the database work much better with the word processor and the spreadsheet, making it feel a very powerful suite. So if I go to our show demo folder, show demo, and then we go to RComp and Fireworks. We have four different statement modes. Two are mainly OWL for landscape, which is fairly obvious that they are landscape versions rather than portrait. One of the versions, one's marked split, incorporate the split view capability, which I will show in a minute. That has also been improved in the latest build. I'll start with the basic statement, which is designed for a bigger screen, apparently. You can see the main feature of statement mode is the oscillating grey and white cells, which make reading rows of numbers incredibly easy, both on screen and on print. The idea is that we call it statement mode because some banks like Lloyds let you download a CSV of your bank statement, and if you load it in, you get a whole load of columns of numbers, which makes it an awful lot easier to read your bank statement in statement mode. But frankly, statement mode applies to anything where you're dealing with rows of numbers, which is pretty much any spreadsheet, quite frankly. So I think statement mode is a pretty flexible thing. And because it's all automated, I can, for example, if we go into examples, I did check these before I started. I have no idea how well this is going to work. If I drop some sample data, okay. So this is an Excel spreadsheet. If we loaded the Excel into an ordinary spreadsheet layout, that's kind of, it's a multi-chart, multi-page Excel spreadsheet. But you can see the columns and pages of numbers and stuff. I've dropped the data in because I've already got the statement open. It has loaded that data into the pre-existing statement. It's realised which of the two Excel sheets I wanted to do, and then what it's done is you can see it's maintained some of the colourings from the Excel, so you can see the red negative numbers, but it's realised that because I've opened a statement, I want to view this Excel data in a statement. And what we have here, you can see all of that Excel data that when it was viewed in Excel was just literally white cells. Loaded into statement mode, we can easily read off 1,498 across 2.3, 3.9, 4.7, 7.2, whatever. You can easily follow that across both on screen, and of course if we printed that out, you can see that it's automatically paginated it into a series of A4 documents, so if we printed that out it would be much easier to read on print as well. The split view, if I do the same demonstration with split view, that would be statement split. We'll do it in the landscape version for a change. So what we see here is that we have the headings split across the top of the page, so you can see heading 1, 2, 3. It's actually duplicated at the moment because it's what we're seeing is essentially two views. One is a fixed with one of the headings, and the rest is the spreadsheet as a whole. One of the changes that's been made in the latest FileWorks is to allow this split to be as thin as you like. So in previous versions you were actually locked by the height of the window furniture, which was kind of annoying, and you couldn't really go much below about 2 rows of cells. With the latest one, we can squidge it right up so that just the heading is done. So if we now then move that to one side, drop our Excel spreadsheet into that again. Whoop. Sorry, this is really doing my neck trying to squirm around. And then we scroll down our pages and pages of numbers, and you can see that the heading columns stay in place. Now, in this case, it's actually taken the column formatting from the original Excel document because we were in Excel, so it's not perhaps the best demonstration of that particular feature using the Excel data set as the source document. If you used the CSV file, for example, that wouldn't have any pre-formatting in it, so it wouldn't have kept column widths, so it would just load it into the columns as we've seen. But you can see how the split view ensures that the headings remain visible at the top of the page as we scroll up and down. Now that's been something to some degree that's possible with FileWorks for many, many years. But one of the things that we have noticed with programs like FileWorks is that you've got extremely powerful pieces of software. The number of people who actually know how to do these things with FileWorks, you can count, well, not quite on the fingers of one hand, but you don't necessarily know how to use features or how best to utilise those features that are present, even if you know they're there for your work. And so one of the things we wanted to do with this was actually to show how that split view could be used practically without you actually needing to know the ins and outs of it. In practical terms, you want to go up to the spectacles and enable the horizontal splits and so on. But it's an awful lot easier if it's done for you. So that is the statement mode, which obviously makes working with spreadsheets much, much easier. The database portion changes are a little bit harder to demonstrate because we actually have to, you really want to show the integration with the word processor, which really means creating a new database. I will create a table called card, and then some create, and this is really hard typing like this. It's not how you spell address, but we'll go with it anyway. Okay, so we'll just make a very, very simple database with a record card. One of the nice features of FileWorks is that you can actually change the style of the database. between sheet and card mode. In sheet mode, the database is represented as a spreadsheet with the records down one side and the fields horizontally across. In card mode, so we can get some information. I appreciate this is a very basic database, but I just wanted to just have a couple of records for the sake of demo purposes. I probably would have created something earlier. So if we then switch that back to sheet view, so probably, I think I forgot to add another record. This is going patient very rapidly. Okay, yes, we'll go back. Bring up a document. Text. There we go. Mail notes, that's what I'm looking for. So we can select. Quick while you have beer ahead, Andrew. Suffice to say, the database and the integration with the database, this is going to sound really stupid, is much more simple. If you'd like a proper demonstration, come to the stand. The mail merge has been significantly enhanced to make incorporating database records into the word processor much easier. So, so that's fireworks. The other major release for this show, although admittedly it is a beta rather than the final version, but it's so much of a beta that we're using it as our main version in the office. So, is NetFetch 5.5, which is the latest version of our email fetching and receiving program. So as I say, we're using it in our office as the main version. That means all the email that comes in and out of Arcom is going through the latest NetFetch. So it's probably not too bad state. The main change is support for the latest TLS 1.2 controls via the new Acorn SSL module. This is a joint venture between RISC OS Developments and RISC OS Open to deliver modern SSL and TLS security to RISC OS. And the new version of NetFetch represents a colossal amount of work for programmers. One thing that's easy to forget with projects where something like Acorn SSL is made by a programmer under the RISC OS Development stroke rule, how the right word. Under the auspices of RISC OS Open and RISC OS Development, is that of course the programmers who are actually using that module, it takes a colossal amount of time to adapt their code to work with the new modules. So in fact, we've actually had to rewrite the fetching and sending code in NetFetch about 4 times over the last 6 months to accommodate the ever-changing aspects of the Acorn SSL module. Although nominally it's been sort of release-worthy for quite a few months, the number of sort of bug fixes and problems that we've had to find, report, wait for fixes, and so on. And of course, while you're waiting for a fix, you're also trying to work around the problem. So you're developing your own workarounds for problems, and then discovering that the next version of the module fixes them, so you unpick that. And suffice to say, massive amount of work. But the good news is we can now access the very latest secure servers. So anybody who is running with modern SSL on their email servers, NetFetch 5.5 is the silver bullet that makes it all work. You're possibly thinking, didn't I tell you much the same thing at the Wakefield show or what have you last year? Yeah. That basically topped out at TLS 1.1. The latest standard is TLS 1.3. And in the intervening 12 months, those standards have been enforced. So, for example, a number of people over the Christmas period were emailing to say that Neil Spelling's email service, which was nominally a RISC OS friendly email service through, I forget his company name because it's been through a few iterations, but it's an email service that was sold at RISC OS shows for quite a few years. They were enforcing TLS 1.3 as of this January, so this is a very real thing that is affecting RISC OS users even from, if you like, RISC OS friendly services. The way I've come around with Spellings was actually just to disable the SSL on the accounts. That's not a very practical solution for the real world. So with the latest NetFetch, you will be able to get full TLS 1.3 support, and the Acorn SSL module is being developed in such a way that it tracks the ARM SSL implementation. So in future, whenever there are any changes, it will be easy for RISC OS to benefit from those changes. So having made that move over to the Acorn SSL environment over the last 6 months, we will then be able to offer further updates to NetFetch security as free updates for users of the Acorn SSL version going forwards. So NetFetch 5.5 is available on the stand. The upgrade price from NetFetch 5 is £15, which is cheaper than the last upgrade, which was a £20 upgrade. So we've tried to keep the cost as low as possible. But on the other hand, we have to cover the cost of 6 months development work to actually implement the technology. So, yeah, Fireworks, NetFetch, the two main software releases for us at the show. On the hardware front, we've been quite busy over the last 12 months with different hardware projects. Everything kicked off last Wakefield with Minin. 2 inches in every direction. Packs the same computing performance as a full ARM X6 for roughly half the price. And an eighth of the volume, I don't know. Literally, it is the same processor, running the same clock speed. It has the same gigabit Ethernet. It has the same 4K video output. It has a SATA connection, so you can plug in a solid-state disk at full speed. It's, you know, a complete computer system in every sense. It's just really small, and it starts at £299. The sort of deluxe model with extra cabling, storage, and all sorts of other bells and whistles is £350, which is obviously quite a big drop in price compared to an ARM X6 at £699. So it's an attractive way into a modern, high-resolution RISC OS computer. As I say, we actually have this on the stand running at 3440 by 1440 resolution, big super wide monitor. It's the largest monitor on the stand connected to the smallest computer. Even more amusingly, the only power that goes to the system is actually to the monitor. The monitor is to power the computer. It does so because the monitor has a USB port, and the USB port provides a basic level of power which is enough to power the Mini. Now that actually opens up a whole load of other interesting ideas, because if you can power a computer that's as powerful as an ARM X6 from a single USB port, think about the things that have a USB port. I mean, think about all the mobile phone chargers, think about aeroplane seats with USB ports in, or I think some of the rails, I'm not a rail person really, but I think they have USB ports around.
And some of the buses do.
Some of the buses. USB ports are ubiquitous everywhere. You can power an entire computer from one. You can buy power packs that are completely portable, which charge via USB for phones, that can power a computer. It's food for thought. Well, you know what the situation with RISC OS and Wi-Fi is, that the hardware has Wi-Fi. RISC OS does not have Wi-Fi unless you use something like that Hi-Fi product or WSPI from RISC OS bits. Or there are other solutions of network to Wi-Fi. You've got a gigabit Ethernet port on the device, so a suitable network connected Wi-Fi adapter of some kind is the solution for that for RISC OS. Or as I say, if you're running another operating system like Linux on it, there is Wi-Fi and Bluetooth in the hardware. So that's the Mini, which was Wakefield last year. By the end of the summer, as you know from how I started, we had interest from the Far East, which is that first middle bar. The ARM book, or Pine book as it's known for the rest of the world, an ARM-powered RISC OS laptop. No smoke and mirrors, no Raspberry Pi strapped to the back. An honest to goodness ARM processor being driven by RISC OS in the same sort of manner that Acorn did with the A4. Only, well, I couldn't hold it. I'm not a strong guy, and I couldn't hold an A4 like that. It's got colour. This particular one runs 1366 by 768. 14-inch display. That particular one is a TN panel, which is not the. I prefer IPS panels. I'm an IPS panel. I'm not proposing to hook this up to anything. I more suggest that you come to the stand and actually have a play. But you can see a wide range of RISC OS applications on it. We have been hard at work on this since the last show, although the progress that we can show is not as obvious as I would like. Essentially, the work following the last show has primarily tackled two areas. Firstly, within a week of getting back from the show, this even littler fellow arrived through the post from the Far East, which is essentially the same thing, only smaller but higher resolution, with the IPS screen that I was just whispering about. This is their most recent production, and so we actually need to support the new version of the hardware. If I just put this down for 1 second. I'm currently running in what we call big mode, so if we look at Fireworks, it should be at least recognisable even from the back on the small screen. I'm not going to ask people on the back row to read text, but you can probably see that there is text there. Big mode, the idea behind that is for people whose eyesight is maybe not quite as 20/20 or better. But we actually have a full 1080p display on this screen. If I switch it to what we call small mode, which is running the 1080p as a full 1080. I mean, it's always running at 1080p, but in big mode, it uses it to enhance the crispness of text and basically zoom into it as sort of a doubling, as it were, but with extra, rather than just sort of zooming in, it actually uses it to get extra crispness. At 1080p, I'm certainly not going to ask anybody in the back to see anything, but you do have a full 1080p display, and if you're actually sat close to it, like you would be if you were actually using it, anybody with fairly decent vision would be quite happy using it at the full 1080p. My vision is not particularly good and I'm comfortable using it normally. However, for the purposes of show, I shall switch it back to big mode because I think it's easier for people to see that. The flexibility of having a full 1080p display, though, is well worth commenting on, because one of the problems you get with laptops is that you can never go really higher resolution than what it comes with by a standard. So if it ships with a relatively low resolution and you fill your desktop and you would like some extra space, there isn't much you can do about it. With a 1080p desktop, you have that space, and whether you use it to zoom in and work closely because your eyesight's not so good, or whether you use it to zoom out and have a really big desktop, at least you've got that flexibility. So that is the smaller unit. So that was the first area of work that we had to tackle, supporting both sizes of display. And what we found was, of course, that the hardware inside the smaller unit was subtly different in many important ways compared to the bigger units. Rather amusingly, this also backfired for the manufacturers in the Far East, where most of the Linux distributions also had similar problems. It was possible for, I think it took at least a week before, after we got the hardware, before we were even able to actually boot a Linux distribution on it, because they hadn't got their act together either. The other big area that we've been working hard on, which is not a particularly visible area but is absolutely critical for operation, is stability of the disk I/O. So whenever you use a computer and you load and run programs and you save data, you're doing disk I/O. If that isn't 110% rock solid, you've got problems. If you can't trust the data that you save and the data that you read, you don't want to be in that situation. You don't have a usable computer. So what we showed at the London show was probably about 95% of the way there. But getting that last 5%, or I suppose you can say 15% to get that 110% reliability was a major challenge. The disk I/O in these devices is very different to how RISC OS has done disk I/O previously. It didn't fall into the sort of, if you like, pre-created grooves that had existed previously. So a lot of new work had to be done. The good news is that sort of a couple of weeks after Christmas, we have got to that point where the disk I/O is solid, and I haven't seen any more problems in that regard since then. But of course, that did put us back by a couple of months compared to where we wanted to be. I was hoping to be in that position by sort of early November, but because of the new version coming out and the extra work that had to be done, it has pushed things back. So that isn't particularly tangible when you use the machine, that has changed compared to what we showed in October. But what I was showing in October was carefully selected. I didn't have Messenger Pro on there because Messenger Pro with email does a lot of disk I/O. I couldn't trust that it wasn't going to corrupt the data. The version I'm showing at this show, I pulled no punches. All of the usual demo software is on there. So, you know, what you see is what you get. The other things that we've been able to tackle in the intervening time, we now have control over the brightness. So, I think, again on this one, I'll need to go to small mode because I stupidly put the icons over here at 1080p. We're currently running, I think, at about 65% brightness. That's at 85% brightness. And when it powers on, it comes on about 50% brightness, which is still actually enough to use in my office at home, but 100% brightness is even brighter still. In normal use, the 100% brightness is so bright that we haven't bothered to actually create a mode for that because it's literally eye-poppingly bright. In a dark room like this, it kind of works against me, but we'll just go back to small mode. So we have control over the brightness. We also have control over the real-time clock, so date and time are now correct. And we also have CMOS settings working, so we can configure it under RISC OS. For example, Linux likes to turn on with the numlock enabled. Now you might notice that there isn't a numerical keypad, which makes having numlock enabled by default incredibly stupid. Thanks to having working CMOS, we don't have numlock on anymore by default. So RISC OS puts up a sensible mode without trying to use half the keys as a numerical keypad that doesn't exist. So that gives us much finer control over the hardware. We are currently working on getting the second USB port working. We can see the USB port. We've just got to apply power to it, and finding the right bits to poke to get the power out is what I've left John doing today, essentially. That has been a busy time for us on the hardware. I should point out that we have Michael from Sweden at the back, who is the guy who first initiated the Pinebrook project last summer, and who did all the initial work that you saw through to the London show. He's been helped recently by John Balance, who did the RMX6 work. So it's very much a joint effort now. But Michael is on the RCOM stand if you would like to chat to him about his work and experience porting RISC OS to new hardware. Michael is also getting my vote for most productive person of RISC OS this last year because he is also responsible for the main web browser that I'm going to show you. So Pinebook plus web browser in the space of 6 to 8 months. It's not too bad. Sorry to embarrass you, Michael. I would gently suggest that in the RISC OS Awards this year, maybe Jeffrey Lee has some competition. I'll leave it to you. Yeah, so that's that hardware. The final piece of hardware that we've launched at this show is the Titan. I haven't brought that into the stand because it's quite large. The Titan is basically a more traditionally housed titanium machine, with the idea is twofold. Firstly, to offer a titanium machine that is a more traditional case that people who have had more traditional shaped computers are. We often get people saying, we like your computers, Archon, but why do you insist on making them in small cases that, you know, I have a space in my desk for a tower PC, and why can't you sell me a tower PC? Well, we now can. The Titan also, by virtue of being a more traditional chassis, is also cheaper, so we'd be able to knock over £100 off the price. So the Titan starts at $775 rather than $899, but still offers all of our regular titanium offering is the Time Machine, which comes with a vast software and custom software and recovery tools, all sorts of goodies. Almost all of that carries over to the Titan. The only thing we've dropped is some of the sort of legacy support for old Archimedes era software, simply because with the Time Machine being called a time machine, the name was a play on the ability to run really old software, so we thought, well, for the Titan, let's put some clear water in there and drop the very legacy software. But of course you can still download that from the website, so you know, quite frankly, you're getting the bulk of the software, you're getting big discount on price, but for the same performance and capabilities. So it's a pretty good deal, and lowers the barrier for entry to the titanium hardware. So that's our hardware activities. The final product I will just mention in passing because I intend to now hopefully use that to demonstrate demonstrate the web browser, is our Pi-Fi product. Pi-Fi version 3 was launched at the October show. Pi-Fi basically lets you turn a Raspberry Pi, ideally a Pi 3, but it does support Pi 0, Pi 2, etc. The reason I recommend the Pi 3 is because the Pi 3 has quite flexible Wi-Fi capabilities on it. It allows you to turn a Pi into a Wi-Fi receiver for your other computers. Basically, you can either connect it directly to a computer, or you can connect it to a network hub and put a whole network of computers on Wi-Fi. We're using that to get internet connectivity at the show for our machines in order to demonstrate the web browser. Pi-Fi comes on a micro SD card. You just slot it into a Raspberry Pi, put the Raspberry Pi up to your computer via its network port, and the beautiful thing about Pi-Fi version 3 is that it implements a RISC OS front end, so you can actually configure the whole thing through a pretty Wi-Fi application on RISC OS, just like a Wi-Fi application on Windows or other platforms. You see the signal strength and so on. Now, I'm probably going to need to reboot this machine now because I need to make it DHCP express from the Pi-Fi now. The Pi-Fi is there, so I'm going to reboot and cross my fingers times and anything else I can cross that this demonstration works as it should do. But it's not tomorrow's work. I feel better sometimes.
It doesn't look anything like Judith,
And that's taking through. It helps if you plug the network feed in. So basically the web browser. When Richard did a similar RISC OS development talk at the London show, he had to admit that progress on the web browser had been rather limited. Which prompted Michael to think, well, let's see what he could do, because he was on a temporary break from the Pine Book. Fairly rapidly, a prototype new browser appeared for Michael called OWB. OWB is based on a browser for primarily sort of the Amiga scene, but it uses the WebKit engine found in browsers like Chrome and Microsoft Edge is now going, that now uses a version of WebKit. Safari on the Mac was the original home for WebKit. So it's using an engine that is industry standard. And what OWB specializes in is being portable. So what it does is it presents the web objects that it creates on the web page in a standardized format for easy porting to different environments, particularly embedded use. But as I say, it's common on the Amiga and other operating systems. And the initial objective was just to get it to do anything with RISC OS, and Michael achieved that in a remarkably quick time. I felt it was just almost a matter of weeks. And then from there, once we got a proof of concept, instead of the initial version used something called SDL, which is basically the equivalent of Windows DirectX graphics. It basically put it in a window in the screen, but essentially in a box without any user interface. Obviously, that's not what we're aiming for. Generally, we want a native RISC OS web browser. So once we've got the proof of concept that we can actually draw it into a box on the screen, the next step with writing a web browser is to actually make those objects that are being described by the engine translate directly into RISC OS items. So rather than relying on this DirectX SDL concept, Michael developed a system where each of these objects it gets painted into a RISC OS sprite, essentially, which is what you see on the screen. And by rendering each of these items into a page, you get a web page, which you can then plot into a RISC OS window with a RISC OS toolbar and all the other RISC OS window furniture that you would expect. So essentially, it takes away all the SDL stuff, and you replace it with plotters that are native to RISC OS. And what you end up with is a native RISC OS web browser. Now, all being well, I now have an internet connection. I will go into our show demos folder and see if Pi-Fi has anything to say. If it doesn't, then we could be in trouble. Arcom, Pi-Fi v3, and we're in trouble. Fantastic. It looks okay. Just put this down. That's not picked up the right stuff. This is going to go pear-shaped very rapidly. What I may have to do is show the web browser running with just our local HTML files if I cannot get it to do. Yeah, I can see the Pi-Fi rebooting here. So I'm not getting enough power for the Pi-Fi through. Which by extension means if I can't power the Pi-Fi, this thing's never going to get a network address. Yeah. Okay, so what I'm going to have to do is just show offline. I've had it working on the stand, so what I'm going to suggest that you do is, if you'd like to see a live web demo, we do that on the stand rather than the talk. I apologise for that, but sometimes technology just is a bit of a pain in the neck. So we'll go to, so you can see we've got OWB here. to the icon bar, and I have here a file called help/html. I'll drop that on there. You can see. Oh, fantastic. And this is where we everything is done. It's a text-only page, but there should have been a toolbar at the top there, which we're not seeing because of the resolution, I would guess. Try that. You can see how quickly it's opening, and that's done. I'm going to ask you to be understanding. Michael, we need to talk. I suspect it's because we've got it all set up for well, when we're testing, we're usually running at 1920 by 1080 or higher, but I suspect that...
No, don't do that. Turning the colour mode back helps. No.
It should switch back after 10 seconds.
Excuse me, Andrew. The problem is that the template for the UI is kind of
yes.
hard-coded. So
if we go to develop and WinEd and OWV, we can do some live software development. Engine, OWV temp, and open main, and go to there, and to the pane, and we'll to there.
you may have to resize the pane.
Which, I mean, we should have enough room. Well, let's see.
It's exactly the same on the armbook with your template.
There you are.
Oh,
So, as I said, the irony is that we increased the size of the window for the show because we wanted to make it nice and big on a 1080p display, and then of course on the projector it's half the size. Now, there aren't any pictures here apart from the user interface, because this is just a text-only page, so I'm sorry, that's all I can do because of the Wi-Fi situation. I would strongly recommend coming and checking it out on the stand, because then you'll be able to see all the JavaScript and things in action. We've used the user interface from Browse as a guide, because Browse was much loved amongst the RISC OS community, and it gave us a user interface fairly rapidly for development purposes. RISC OS Development, of course, owns the rights to use the Browse interface because of the acquisition of the Castle technology. So this is perfectly legitimate. It has a nice hark back to the Acorn era of offering a RISC OS web browser that is familiar as a RISC OS browser, whilst having an engine that is much more powerful. You can see there that the text isn't particularly pretty. We have two versions of the browser at the moment. One has very pretty fonts but is quite slow at scrolling, and the other has less pretty fonts and is much faster. So you can scroll up and down. With that version, we can click on things. So it feels very RISC OS. We have zoom buttons up the top here, and a URL bar. You know, it's a RISC OS web browser. But in the faster version, you don't have the pretty fonts. You saw that it opened the window in sort of 2 or 3 seconds. If I just close that again, so you can all actually sort of watch. 1, 2, barely 2 seconds, wasn't it? If you compare that to something like Otter that we've had previously, where it took sort of, on ARMX6 you were getting 8 to 10 seconds, on a Raspberry Pi it could be up to 30, I think. You can see that makes a huge difference. This is an ARMX6 running it, not a titanium, or so you could probably knock another couple of seconds off it for a titanium. On a Raspberry Pi, you're probably looking at about maybe sort of 6-7 seconds. Considerably faster than what's gone before. If we load it, we also have the pretty fonts version, so you can see what we also have, but you also see the downside of it at the moment. We're working on trying to make well, either that faster, or we're also looking at using RISC OS fonts rather than web fonts, which would obviously make it feel even more RISC OS-y and fast. The trade-off there is, do we have RISC OS fonts which would make it feel very RISC OS and very, very nippy, or do we have the flexibility of being able to use sort of any web font with it, which for some websites would give a greater flexibility with typeface rendering. It's a sort of trying to figure out exactly the balance is always part of the challenge. So if we do that and that, and go to there, and we do that, and that version, and we'll click on our file. You can see that has obviously got prettier fonts. Yeah. But you also saw that it, ignore the toolbar and you saw that it took an extra couple of seconds to, or maybe a second extra to start up. But what is far more telling is if I start to scroll, you can see that the scroll is much slower with the pretty fonts. That's something that is a current focus of attention, I think we would say. That is where we are at with the web browser. In terms of JavaScript and things, it has a modern implementation of JavaScript. If you sites that make use of things like image rollovers and things like, if you go to the rule website, the bar across the top is supposed to highlight as you move your pointer over it. It doesn't in NetSurf, it does in this. Similarly on the Archon website on RISC cubes, we have a similar effect across the top. Again, that works quite happily in OWB, it doesn't in any of the other RISC OS browsers, apart from web servers.
How does that compare with Otter in terms of function?
Basically, it's a sort of similar era, it's a similar generation of WebKit, but obviously much faster and able to be as a native browser engine. There is a newer version of OWB available, which is, if you like, a next step up, but I've suggested to Michael that we concentrate on the sort of RISC OSiness on the current version, and then we've got a version 2 that we can go on to in due course. That will add in even more modern WebKittiness. So it's all good. I mean, there's a good future here. But of course, what we're trying to do is work up through the different types of objects that you've got to plot. So basically, there are all sorts of different types of objects that come out of the browser engine, as it were, and you have to basically write RISC OS plotters for each one. So what you're seeing is maybe 2/3 of the kind of objects. Would that be?
No, it's more than that.
Okay.
It's in YouTube.
Sorry?
On YouTube.
There is on other platforms, OWB does run YouTube, yes.
Okay.
But on RISC OS, you've got the problem of doing video on RISC OS. Basically, it will require the browser to hook into video playback technology. As I said, that does exist in RISC OS, like with things like MPlayer and FFmpeg and things. But whether those links and the performance level is enough, that's going to be the challenge. You don't run before you can walk, I think would be the. But certainly that's not beyond the realms of something that has been done with OWB.
What about transactional sites, Andrew? Because these are often the
well, I mean, you've got full SSL support in there, and you've got a JavaScript engine.
So could you book a Eurostar ticket quite happily?
I have absolutely no idea because I've never booked a Eurostar ticket. I can say you can search things on Amazon and actually do functional things on Amazon. I haven't actually tried buying anything, but I don't see why not.
Well, you certainly can with Otter and use it mostly for.
Yeah, okay. I mean, the only reason I could say that it wouldn't do that would be if we hadn't plotted the right sort of form objects that are needed to actually do that yet.
You know the JavaScript engine. Is it at a level where you could go in and check Hotmail, or is that still a basic level of JavaScript?
I think it runs out of memory at the moment.
Right.
Hotmail.
Outlook.com isn't there? Would it do that?
Excuse me?
Outlook.com to check web-based email.
Ah, okay. No. I can simply answer that. Because there are reasons why JavaScript is very, very slow.
Right.
Yeah, and that's because there's something called just-in-time compilation.
Right.
And it's lacking that. And Otter has that. That's why Otter is a bit faster than rendering JavaScript pages. But the plan is to work out the RISC OS part in this version and then move on to the next. Hopefully be able to just apply the RISC OS parts. The next version has just-in-time compilation for R. So it should be millions times faster.
Adding to the fact that also does have the just in time, so it's obviously possible within a single version of WebKit. So it's not a wild thing. It's just that basically what you're seeing is essentially about 9 weeks' work, which I would suggest is pretty impressive for 9 weeks. One final thing on the browser. I know I've got to go because Richard was just making gestures into the door. If that wasn't enough for the web browsers, we were also contacted by somebody else who was supporting, who had been very quiet for about 12 months. And he sent us some screenshots. He did send me a full version, but I couldn't make it work on my machine. So I'm probably going around to his house next week. He was very closely to me. And if we go into Iris, and we're doing the Argos screenshot, you can see that is the Argos website running on RISC OS. And this is basically a much more modern version of WebKit. It's basically the current build of WebKit. So that's on a par with the very equivalent of the very latest of Safari or something like that. The problem is I can't get it to work, so I'm reliant on a screenshot. I do know it's considerably slower to load than OWB, so whereas OWB will show loading in a couple of seconds at itself, just to get to the icon bar takes about 8 seconds, and then it's about 15 to 20 seconds, I'm told, before the main page to come up for this as it stands. But what's so exciting about what I'm showing you with this one, I'll show you a second screenshot of eBay, which shows the two. You can see that there's 2 tabs here with eBay and ITV Hub, etc. What's exciting about this is the fact that it represents another aspect of RISC OS development's goals, which is improving the quality of the tools to make software available for RISC OS. So it uses a brand new compiler tool chain, the very latest GCC builds. I want to say GCC 8, but people who use GCC may say I'm talking gibberish. I don't quite know. But there's basically, that was a conversation that we started but didn't finish, so that's why I'm a bit vague on exactly what it's achieved. But it's basically a totally new version of GCC and the associated tools and files, and a totally new way of running RISC OS software, and a totally new way of doing RISC OS memory management, to make it compatible with what the rest of the world is doing right now with ARM processors. So it is extremely exciting, but I can't get it to work. What I'm showing you obviously is very cutting edge, and that's why I'm sort of saying I can't get it to work. Things are happening at incredible rate of knots at the moment. The new versions coming out every day, and new technology coming live. So exciting times. I mean, I say here you can see tabs across the top of the browser for tabbed browsing in RISC OS. You see toolbar, basic button bar, etc. So the reason we're supporting 2 projects is clearly they are sort of, if you like, different aspects of the same nut. Iris with its latest and greatest WebKit, much slower, but potentially the most accurate rendering that could possibly do. OWB offering very fast rendering, and perhaps the best choice as a general purpose web browser for RISC OS. So both projects that we think are well worth supporting as RISC OS developments, and that's what we're doing. So I'm going to shut up now, finish the talk, If you've got questions, I'd like to say do them here, but I think probably people are going to swear at me if I talk any longer. So come to the stand, don't hesitate to ask. Hopefully I've given you a taste of the quite huge amount of stuff that is going on at the moment. And all I can say is please support us with, in any way you can, either be a RISC OS development investor, buy browser CD, buy some software upgrades, buy computers. Please support what we're doing so that we can continue to